The word plague in the original Greek encompasses physical trauma, systemic affliction, devastating impact substantively otherwise that's had on either one's life or one's body. Could be a strike or blow that's from any general source, or otherwise it does encompass as well just simply a condition that compromises life itself. It has a broader meaning than just simply a cut or a stabbing, although there may be a wound or a cut. It can refer, though not necessarily, to something that stems or sources from a severe strike or severe blow. Alternatively, it can also be something that arises as an affliction, and as it goes on to state in Greek literature and the New Testament, that same term is broadly used to describe physical wounds generally, plagues or diseases generally, even divine judgments that come upon people, general calamity, and devastating impact substantively, figuratively. Very interesting. The prophecy seems to point to a genuine, historically significant event where someone survives what should be unsurvivable, leading to profound theological and historical implications and consequences, with the interpretation of those consequences varying based on religious and theological perspective. Keely. Probable real-world scenario, the prophecy does seem to indicate a major public figure of some sort, a genuinely fatal condition or event, a genuinely extraordinary recovery, and this becoming a defining moment in history, with different groups interpreting it through their own theological lens. This, of course, stems chiefly from several or a few interrelated portions or verses within Scripture, the main one of them being this Greek portion, with a careful AI provided translation, considering the nuances, could or may be, and I saw one of its heads as having been slaughtered to death, and its death wound was healed. More portions touch upon this as well here. It is a wound that is unambiguously fatal in nature, where the Greek uses terms for violent slaughter and specifically mentioning it as a death blow. A recovery that is presented as miraculous or supernatural in character, using terminology that parallels resurrection language even. A figurative, spiritual, essential language. And thirdly, it goes on to state this event going on to then serve as a key factor in people's amazement and subsequent following of this figure. Regarding the sword reference, while literally meaning a sword, the term, apparently as it ends up being found, is used figuratively or even often used metaphorically, really, in prophetic literature, where the term does naturally appear in context that may represent literal weapons, but also as symbols of authority, instruments of judgment, or just general lethal force, or even fatal actions or events, broadly speaking. The text presents this as a future event from the perspective of John the Revelator's vision, where someone who will be identified as the beast suffers what should be, by all normal medical and physical standards, a definitively fatal wound. Categorically, it would be specifically described as it being as a sword wound to the head. That's what appears, the wound of such a nature or type. Yet this figure somehow survives or recovers in a way that defies normal medical explanation. Regarding this fatal aspect of it, it is ordinarily again a lethal or fatal nature that the wound would have, where it goes on to state that the key point is that it is the type of wound that would normally cause death. It goes on to state or mention here that the Greek does use what's called prophetic phenomenological language, that is, the describing of things by their apparent effect or appearance rather than their specific mechanism. Interesting, this is common in apocalyptic literature, where the vision often represents concepts through familiar physical symbols. That's right. It goes on to state that The emphasis is on the fact simply of some catastrophic injury or affliction otherwise, really, something that would normally be fatal, and mind you, affecting the head specifically in some way, the shocking nature of even the fact of survival, and within the circumstance, naturally, it having a supernatural appearing uh, kind of recovery that is plainly manifest and happening. Goes on to state that the wound could potentially be from physical trauma, disease, some medical condition, or any catastrophic event that would normally be fatal. This is something that, as AI figures by its linguistic and deep, nuanced semantic contextual analysis, it implies something that would cross the threshold where survival would be, at the very least, unexpected, and that this is furthermore a state from which recovery seems impossible by normal means. It further mentions the wound appears to be genuinely fatal, the recovery appears to be genuinely extraordinary. AI here goes on to state it's quite explicit that Christians and Christian tradition understand this figure to be the same one that Jewish tradition anticipates as their Messiah. It goes on to state, particularly in the role of Moshiach ben Yosef, although it notes Christian tradition actually doesn't usually make this specific distinction, largely because they're not even aware of it whatsoever, pretty much. Goes on to state the traditional Christian interpretation unmistakably identifies this beast or Antichrist figure with whoever the Jewish people will recognize as their Messiah, who will help rebuild the temple, who will be accepted by many as fulfilling the Jewish messianic expectations. The figure in all three Abrahamic traditions builds and restores the temple, is recognized by the Jewish people as fulfilling the messianic roles, is specifically associated with the first or warrior or suffering Messiah role of the future, so to speak, now, right? These all align with Moshiach ben Yosef's traditional role. It goes on to state here, secondly, the convergence is striking. Christian tradition speaks of this figure as building the temple. Islamic tradition holds a Dajjal associated with the temple's restoration. But the Jewish tradition says that's right, that's Moshiach. He is the one who paves the way, fights the wars, and builds the temple. It goes on to state here, importantly, many contemporary Jews focusing solely on Jewish sources may not even be fully aware that this specific parallel even exists across all the traditions, that there are these additional prophetic descriptions of the figure they await, which includes the potentially survivable fatal wound or condition that heralds the start of the whole thing. That's the key thing to know. And they're right.